It's funny how glass reflects back more than your face. Standing on the sidewalk outside Anderson Lux, I could see myself layered over the window display, a cascade of silk scarves, Italian handbags, and a Christmas tree strung with white gold ornaments. My name, in bold, brushed gold letters, shimmered just above my reflection. Claire Anderson. The same Claire they used to laugh at. I smoothed the sleeve of my cream silk blouse, feeling the whisper of fabric against my skin. The December air had that sharp, clean bite that made my lipstick feel cooler than it should, a perfect deep berry shade I'd picked that morning. My phone buzzed in my palm, a text lighting up the screen. Family Christmas this year? Everyone's coming. Would love for you to bring one of your special gifts. The word special was wrapped in digital quotation marks, a private little joke that wasn't private at all. My pulse ticked up. It had been years since I'd been at one of those gatherings, years since I'd watched their smirks as they tore open wrapping paper to find something they thought was beneath them. And now they'd have to walk through these doors. I slid my phone into my bag, the soft leather giving a sigh as it closed. Somewhere between that message and my reflection in the glass, I knew this year would be different. It was Christmas Eve, 5 years ago, and my hands smelled faintly of cinnamon from the candles I'd made myself. I'd lined them up in neat little boxes, each tied with red ribbon, labels written in my best cursive. Hand-poured with love, Claire. They weren't expensive, in fact, they were all I could afford that year. Rent had been due, my car had eaten up my savings with a sudden transmission failure, and my job at the diner barely covered groceries. But I'd stayed up late all week, melting wax in thrift store pans, breathing in the comfort of cinnamon and vanilla like it could steady my nerves. When I arrived at Aunt Diane's sprawling house in the suburbs, the smell of roasting turkey filled the air. The living room glittered with a tall tree dripping in ornaments, every surface dressed with glossy garland. My cousins, hair perfect, nails immaculate, wore sweaters that probably cost more than my monthly paycheck. I passed out the boxes, smiling as I did. "Merry Christmas," I said, trying to make my voice bright. They opened them in unison. "Oh," Cousin Brittany said, holding hers between two fingers like it might melt onto her manicure. "How crafty." Someone chuckled. Uncle Ron muttered something about Dollar Tree holidays, and the laughter rolled across the room like sleigh bells made of glass, sharp, cold. I felt heat rush up my neck, and my smile stiffened until it hurt. My fingers found the hem of my cardigan, twisting it to keep them from shaking. Only one person didn't laugh. My grandmother, Edith, sat in her corner chair, wrapped in her plaid shawl. She took the candle, held it close, and inhaled deeply. "Smells like care," she said, looking at me with eyes that had weathered a lifetime. Then, quieter so only I could hear, "Never be ashamed of giving what you have. The right people will see its worth." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, tarnished silver key on a chain. "For your future," she whispered. It wasn't until later, when I sat alone in my tiny apartment, that I turned it over and saw the words engraved in small letters, "Unlock your own doors." That night I made a decision. If they measured worth by price tags, fine. I'd build something they couldn't measure, something they couldn't laugh at, and I'd do it without ever asking for their help again. I slipped the key around my neck and went to work the next morning with a fire inside me I hadn't felt in years. The morning after Christmas, while the rest of the world lounged in pajamas and picked at leftover pie, I opened my laptop at the wobbly kitchen table of my one-bedroom apartment. The silver key lay against my collarbone, cool and steady, like it was reminding me of the promise I'd made. I started researching how to turn my candles into something more than a hobby. Labels, wholesale wax suppliers, marketing tips, it was overwhelming, but I refused to close the browser. I didn't have money for fancy courses, so I learned from YouTube videos, late-night forums, and free online webinars. At night, I poured candles in my cramped kitchen, the counters lined with mismatched mugs I used as molds. By day, I worked shifts at the diner, my apron smelling faintly of coffee and fryer oil. I kept a notebook in my apron pocket, scribbling ideas during lulls, potential brand names, Instagram post captions, little sketches of packaging. It was during one of those shifts that I met Margaret Collins. She was a regular, silver hair and a sharp bob, tailored blazer, even on Saturdays, the kind of woman who looked like she knew exactly where she was going. One slow afternoon, she noticed me sketching between refills. "You've got an eye for detail," she said, tapping my notebook. "What's that for?" I told her, half embarrassed, about my candle dream. Instead of the polite nod I expected, she leaned forward. "If you're serious, you need a plan. And I'm going to help you write one." Margaret became my unofficial mentor. She showed me how to price my products for profit, how to pitch to boutique owners, and how to design a brand that didn't scream homemade, even if my kitchen was still my factory. The first time a small lifestyle shop agreed to carry my candles, I nearly cried in the stockroom. It wasn't much, 10 candles on a wooden shelf, but seeing my work in someone else's store was a quiet, private triumph. Orders trickled in, then grew. I reinvested every dollar, upgrading from thrift store pans to real equipment, from printer paper labels to embossed gold foil. My apartment started to look like a mini warehouse. I didn't tell my family. Online, I posted the bare minimum, a photo of my coffee mug, a picture of my cat, nothing that hinted at the life I was building.
It was better that way.
I wanted them to see it all at once, when it was undeniable. 2 years later, I signed a lease on my first storefront. I named it Anderson Luxe, not because it sounded expensive, but because I wanted my name, the same one they'd laughed at, to be front and center. When we opened, there was no ribbon-cutting ceremony, no big announcement. Just me, Margaret, a stack of invoices, and shelves lined with things I'd built from scratch. And yet, even then, I didn't send an invitation. Some things are better discovered. The first snowfall of December came down in soft, lazy spirals, dusting the street outside my store like powdered sugar. Inside, the warm glow of golden pendant lights lit up every polished surface. The scent of white tea and amber floated through the air, subtle, expensive, deliberate. I was rearranging a display of imported cashmere throws when the front door chimed. I looked up. They walked in, as if the universe had staged it. Aunt Diane, Cousin Brittany, Uncle Ron. Coats trimmed in fur, shopping bags from department stores dangling at their wrists. They were mid-laugh about something, and for a second, they didn't notice me. "Wow," Brittany breathed, scanning the space. "This place is nice." I slipped behind the marble counter, my pulse steady. One of my sales associates, Elena, stepped forward. "Welcome to Anderson Luxe. Please let me know if I can help you with anything." Uncle Ron picked up a leather wallet from the display. "Bet this costs more than my car payment," he said with a chuckle. "That's because it's handmade in Florence," Elena replied smoothly. They moved deeper into the store, fingertips grazing shelves of Italian handbags, eyes lingering on the price tags. And then, Brittany froze mid-step. Her gaze had landed on the front window, or rather, the gold script stretched across it. "Anderson Luxe." She blinked, the smirk faltering. "Anderson, wait." She turned, scanning the store until her eyes found mine. "Claire?" Her voice was half disbelief, half something else, something tight. I straightened. "Hello, Brittany." Aunt Diane's head whipped around. "Claire? What are you?" "I own this store," I said, letting the words settle into the air like a slow exhale. Silence. Even the faint music playing over the speakers seemed to hush. "You own it," Aunt Diane finally managed. "Yes." I stepped out from behind the counter, the heels of my boots clicking against the marble floor. I designed the brand, curated the products, signed the lease. Every item in here passed through my hands before it landed on these shelves. Uncle Ron gave a low whistle, but it wasn't admiration, more disbelief. "Since when?" "Since I decided I didn't want my worth defined by the price of my Christmas gifts," I said, meeting his eyes. Their expressions shifted. Brittany's cheeks flushed, and Diane's lips pressed into a thin line. I could see the reel of memories spinning behind their eyes. The candles, the laughter, the way they tossed my gifts aside like they were crumbs. "Everything here is beautiful," Brittany said at last, her voice softer now. I smiled, not cruelly, just enough. "Yes. And it's not just beautiful. It's mine." Elena returned with a small tray of champagne flutes, offering one to each of them. I took mine, the bubbles tickling my nose, and raised it slightly. To unlocking your own doors, I said, the silver key warm against my skin beneath my blouse. They didn't know the meaning, but I did. And in that moment, watching them stand in a store they couldn't have imagined I'd built, I felt something shift. The laughter from that long-ago Christmas no longer stung, because now I was the one holding the room. Aunt Diane set her champagne glass down on the counter, tracing the rim with her finger. Claire, I had no idea you were doing so well. I tilted my head, keeping my smile polite. That's because I didn't tell you. Brittany shifted uncomfortably, running her hand over a silk scarf. We should have been more supportive back then. I guess we didn't realize. That words matter? I cut in gently. That sometimes one careless laugh can stay with a person for years? Uncle Ron cleared his throat. We were just joking. I know, I said, my tone calm. But jokes can be heavy when they land on the wrong shoulders. They fell silent, eyes darting between the shelves and me. I let the pause stretch. Years ago, I might have rushed to fill it.
Not now.
I don't hold grudges, I continued. But I do have conditions if we're going to start seeing each other again. Brittany looked wary. Conditions?
Yes.
I don't expect anyone to buy from my store or spend money they don't have. But I expect respect, for me, for my work, for what I value. That means no jokes at someone else's expense, no belittling gifts, and no dismissing someone's dreams because they don't fit your definition of success. Aunt Diane gave a small nod, though her lips were still pressed tight. And I added, I'd like to see each of you put effort into something that matters to you really matters. Not because it looks good online, but because it feeds you here. I tapped my chest lightly. Uncle Ron raised a brow. Like what? Like the woodworking hobby you gave up because people said it wasn't practical, I said, remembering a stray conversation from years ago. Or Brittany, maybe you try that art class you kept saying you didn't have time for. And Aunt Diane, you always talked about volunteering at the community garden. They looked at me, surprised I'd remembered. These things don't make headlines, and they won't impress everyone. But they'll matter to the right people, and that's enough. I stepped back, giving them space. If you can do that, I think we can start fresh. If not, well, then our paths just stay separate. Brittany nodded slowly, eyes dropping to the floor. Aunt Diane glanced around the store once more, as if seeing it and me for the first time. All right, she said finally. We'll try. Good, I replied, my voice soft but steady. That's all I'm asking. The silver key under my blouse seemed to hum against my skin. This wasn't revenge. This was reclaiming the room on my terms. Over the next few months, the changes came in small, almost invisible ways. Aunt Diane sent me a photo of herself in gardening gloves, dirt smudged across her cheek, standing in front of neat rows of green sprouts at the community garden. No caption, just the picture. But that was enough. Brittany posted a watercolor sunset on her social media. It wasn't perfect, the colors bled at the edges, but she wrote in the caption, trying something new. Not for likes.
Just for me.
Even Uncle Ron surprised me. One Saturday afternoon, I got a knock on my apartment door. He stood there holding a small, hand-carved jewelry box, the wood polished smooth. Made it myself, he said, almost shyly. Thought you could use it in the store. I placed it on a display table the very next day. It wasn't about the gifts. It wasn't even about the changes themselves. It was about the fact that they were trying. One evening, after closing the store, I stood by the front window, watching snow collect in soft drifts along the street. My reflection hovered there again, but this time, I didn't just see myself. I saw the long nights in my kitchen, the smell of melted wax, the ache in my hands, the quiet encouragement in my grandmother's eyes. I reached into my blouse and pulled out the silver key, letting it dangle in the light. Unlock your own doors. The engraving had worn smooth from years against my skin, but the words were still there, etched as deeply in me as in the metal. I thought of that Christmas when I'd been laughed at for giving what I could. And I thought of this Christmas, when they'd walked through the doors I'd built myself. The past didn't sting anymore. It had shaped me, carved out the space where my strength could live. I locked the front door, the click echoing in the quiet shop, and smiled to myself. The right people will see its worth, I whispered, the same words my grandmother had told me. Outside, the snow kept falling, wrapping the street in silence. Inside, I stood surrounded by everything I'd built, knowing I'd never again measure my worth by anyone else's standard. Because I had the key, and I'd already unlocked every door that mattered.